A 14-year-old boy named Alex Granger was tied to a floating ring and dumped 15 miles from shore by the very homeowners association meant to protect his community. His only crime? Writing a polite letter asking them to stop poisoning the neighborhood pond. Charlotte Mayfield, the smug and seemingly untouchable president of the Riverbend HOA, dismissed it all as a community hazing ritual and laughed when questioned later, even as Alex struggled to stay alive in open water. What she didn't count on was the GoPro that recorded every damning second, or the fact that Alex would survive and eventually stand tall in court with the eyes of the nation watching. This isn't just a story about cruelty. It's about how one quiet, awkward boy transformed a moment of unthinkable terror into a tidal wave of justice. Charlotte later told the local news it had all been harmless. Just a joke. A light-hearted community event that had maybe gotten out of hand. But pranks don't involve a scared 14-year-old kid, wrists tied with nylon rope, a life vest half-buckled, being pushed off a speedboat in open water and told, swim back like a real man. Alex wasn't a real man. He was my son. My sweet, gentle son. The kind of boy who still whispered goodnight to his stuffed animals, who cried when he saw videos of injured sea turtles, who had a tower of books about marine life stacked next to his bed so high it would topple if you brushed past it. He was homeschooled not because we didn't trust public schools, but because the world wasn't kind to boys like him. Sensitive, observant, kind in ways that made him an easy target. He loved frogs, algae, old Jacques Cousteau documentaries. His happiest afternoons were spent knee-deep in muck, examining pond samples under a toy microscope. That's the kind of kid they threw in the ocean. It was his first time attending the HOA's so-called Youth Leadership Weekend. It took place at the Mayfield's private beach house, a massive white home perched on a bluff above the Gulf, complete with a dock, 3 jet skis, and the kind of smug architecture that screams influence. Alex begged me to let him go. Said he wanted to try meeting other kids. Maybe it'd help him come out of his shell. I hesitated, like I always did, but eventually I gave in. Packed his bag, reminded him to reapply sunscreen, kissed his forehead. He smiled and promised he'd text when they arrived. He never did. By the time the Coast Guard pulled him from the water, 5 hours had passed since the HOA event. Not drifting. Not lost. Dumped. They'd forced him onto a cheap foam float, barely big enough for his hips, then kicked him off the back of the boat like garbage. Charlotte's husband, Tom, revved the engine and laughed, swim or drift? Up to you, champ. The kids on board laughed too. Nervous laughter, maybe. The kind that curdles in your stomach when you hear it played back on a police recording. The boat sped away. Alex said he tried to paddle for 20 minutes. Maybe 30. But the current was strong and his arms were weak. The water was rough. The salt burned his lips and eyes. The sun was high, the water cold, not freezing, but cold enough to cramp his limbs within an hour. At some point, the float flipped. He lost his balance, hit his jaw, and slipped under. When he surfaced again, he had no idea which direction was land. Just sky and water in every direction. He screamed. No one came. His soaked clothes dragged him down. His cheap water shoes slipped off somewhere around the second hour. He tried using his socks as gloves to tread water, but they fell off too. He swam toward what he thought was a buoy. A crab trap float, bright orange. It looked close. It wasn't. He clawed through the water, panicking, hyperventilating. By the time he reached it, he was too exhausted to move. He clung to it like it was the last piece of earth. A fishing boat eventually spotted him just a speck between waves. He wasn't moving. When the rescue diver pulled him in, his fingernails were blue. His arms torn. Rope burns circled both wrists. His lips were cracked and bleeding. His feet were shredded. Coral, the doctor said. He'd probably tried to stand on a reef when he was too tired to swim. They thought he was dead. But he wasn't. He whispered just one thing when they found him. Where's my mom? Not help. Not I'm hurt. Just that. Soft. Fragile. Like he didn't even believe I was real anymore. They flew him by helicopter to the nearest hospital. He was hypothermic, dehydrated, delirious. Core temperature 93. His heart rate erratic. The ER nurse later told me she didn't expect him to survive the night. I didn't get the call until 6 hours after he was admitted. 6 hours. While I sat at home wondering why he hadn't texted me back. While I made his favorite dinner. Mac and cheese with broccoli. while I joked to myself that maybe he was finally making friends. The HOA never called. Charlotte never called. No one said a damn thing. When I arrived at the hospital, they were already prepping him for ICU. Tubes everywhere. Tape across his face. Pale. Bloated. Alien. I sat by his side, holding his limp hand. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just kept hearing that one sentence. Swim back like a real man. I thought if that's what they think a real man looks like, they're about to find out how wrong they are. He spent 2 full days in the ICU. 48 hours. I didn't sleep once. Just sat by his bed, holding his hand, watching monitors. Watching the jagged green line dip and spike. Oxygen. Heart rate. Blood pressure. Beep. 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 They said he was lucky. Lucky a fishing boat saw him. Lucky the water wasn't colder. Lucky the ropes didn't cut deeper. Lucky he didn't drown. But when you're staring at your son bruised, bleeding, battered, lucky feels like a cruel joke. And the HOA still said nothing. When I finally got a hold of an officer trying to piece together what happened, I learned what the board had told them. That Alex ran off. That he was being dramatic. That he was seeking attention. They didn't mention the boat. Or the float. Or the drinking. They left all of that out. Why did they pick Alex? Why only him? Because he was quiet. Polite. Homeschooled. Because he wouldn't fight back. But now I know the real reason. A month earlier, Alex had written a letter to the HOA. A sweet, respectful letter printed on plain white paper. Folded neatly. Hand-delivered to their drop box. In it, he asked if they could stop using chlorine in the retention pond. He'd been studying local frogs. Noticed more of them were dying. Some had burns. Others were missing limbs. He signed it respectfully, Alex Granger. He was proud of it. Read it to me 3 times. Said maybe the HOA didn't realize they were hurting the frogs. Maybe if someone said something, they'd help. I smiled and said, I think you're right, sweetheart. I didn't know that letter would become a death sentence. They read it aloud at their next meeting. Laughed. One board member joked, tell the tree hugger we'll stop when the frogs pay dues. Charlotte? She said he needed to be taught a lesson. Taught a lesson for caring. 2 days after the ICU, Alex finally woke up. His voice was hoarse, raspy. But he said it. They laughed. Then he added, they called me Frog Boy. He told me Charlotte was the one who pushed him. Deliberately. Smirking. Said, let's see how long your little activist lungs last out there. That's when I stopped being afraid. I stopped being confused. I became someone else. Someone relentless. I left the hospital that night and went straight to the sheriff's office. No makeup. No sleep. Still in the sweatshirt I'd cried into for 3 days. I told them everything. They nodded. Took notes. Promised to look into it. But I saw the hesitation. Heard the word complicated. So I went home and opened my laptop. What Charlotte didn't know, what none of them knew, was that one of the adults on the boat, a neighbor named Carl, had brought a kayak that day. And mounted to it? A GoPro. Motion activated. Waterproof. He forgot he brought it. Handed it over when I asked to borrow the footage for insurance. I didn't expect much. What I found was everything. The rope. The shove. The pleading. Charlotte's voice. Clear as day. Oh, relax, Frog Boy. It's just a swim. Then laughter. Then silence. Then Alex, barely audible, please don't. I can't swim that far. I posted a short clip. Just 1 minute. No names. No explanations. Caption, my son almost died. This is how. Within 6 hours, the post had 2 million views. Within 12, the news was calling. Within 24, Charlotte's name was trending nationwide. She tried to spin it. Said the video lacked context. But context doesn't erase a child begging for his life. Eventually, the DA opened an investigation. The case didn't look complicated anymore. It looked like what it was: child endangerment, unlawful imprisonment, attempted manslaughter. The courtroom was packed. Alex took the stand. I asked them to stop, he said. And they laughed. They played the video. The room went silent. Then a gasp. That was all it took. More victims came forward. Former residents. Parents. Kids who'd aged out. Stories poured in. One woman, Rachel, said Charlotte made her paint her fence just to get HOA approval. Another man was fined $500 for leaving his trash out for 15 minutes. A teenager was forced to apologize to the board for rolling his eyes. Then the real bomb dropped. The HOA's vice president, Daniel Pierce, flipped, took a plea deal, admitted everything, said it was premeditated. Charlotte's idea, she said. Let's see how long before he wets his little green shorts. The judge didn't hold back. Called it one of the most egregious abuses of power he'd ever seen. The HOA dissolved, immunity revoked, titles stripped, their empire gone. Charlotte was sentenced to 14 years in state prison. No parole for the first 7. The others got 5 to 10 years. After sentencing, a letter arrived. From the U.S. Coast Guard. They'd seen Alex's story. They were starting a youth program for marine safety and conservation. They wanted Alex to be the first honorary member. Not because he was a victim. Because he was a voice. He read it twice. Then cried. This time not from pain. From something deeper. Hope. He looked at me and whispered, maybe the ocean can feel safe again. Today, he volunteers at the Sea Life Rescue Center. He's applying to early college programs for marine biology. He didn't just survive. He became something more. As for me, I ran for a seat on the new neighborhood council. Not for power. For accountability. For frogs. For kids. For people like Alex. And slowly the frogs came back. So did the trust. The warmth. The community. Because the thing about justice? It doesn't always roar. Sometimes it comes in waves. And sometimes the boy they tried to drown comes back not to destroy but to cleanse. Alex is that wave. Not loud, but unstoppable. And Charlotte? She'll have 14 years to think about the boy who wouldn't sink. The boy who became the storm.